My name is Travis Sentiment. I am the Managing Director of Friends of the Big Sioux River. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. We are really excited to be hosting this event for the second time. Last year we had an event similar to this, talking about water quality information and a book panel. So it's really nice to do this again. We're here to learn about and celebrate the river that runs through our backyard. And I hope tonight everyone takes away something new and a deeper relationship with the Big Sioux. Okay, so just as a refresher, if you're not familiar with us, Friends of the Big Sioux is a water advocacy nonprofit on a mission to protect and restore the Big Sioux River and its watershed. We have 4 main focus areas that we work on. Those are water quality monitoring, public policy and advocacy, river restoration, and education. All these core values, those core areas all center around improving our local community and building a conservation ethic. Okay, cool agenda. So we're going to jump right into it so you don't have to listen to me talk all night. We're going to kick off tonight with our 2023 water quality testing data from the Big Sioux River watershed from our board members, Rachel Close and Emily Owes, our outreach and donor coordinator. These updates, they will update you on what we saw this year and the overall trend we're seeing around water quality in the Big Sioux. From there, Jay Gilbertson of East Dakota Water Development District and Troy Larson of Lewis and Clark Regional Water System will give their keynote presentation titled, When Demand Exceeds Availability, Where Will the Extra Water Come From? This thought-provoking presentation will center around the use of current water resources, the growing demand of water across the state, and the importance of protecting the finite resource for the future. And then at the end, if we have time, we'll have a Q&A session as well. I would like to give a special thanks to Augustana University and their Office of Sustainability and Environmental Studies program for helping sponsoring tonight's event. And I also want to thank our great partner organizations that are here, the City of Sioux Falls, Minnehaha Conservation District, and the Big Sioux River Project. You might have seen their booths out in the lobby. Please stick around at the end and find them and learn more about what they're working on in this area. If you want to learn more about water quality issues in Big Sioux River, coming up December 7th is the Big Sioux River and Sustainability Summit put on by the City of Sioux Falls. It's a great opportunity to learn more about what the city and partners are doing to help improve conservation and sustainability in the area. And on February 8th, we're hosting our 3rd annual Big Sioux River Film Festival here in Sioux Falls at the State Theater. This is a night of film, conversation, and a hope for the future of our Big Sioux River. And then one more note, you probably saw the QR codes out in the lobby. If you haven't already, scan the QR code for a chance to win one of our door prizes tonight. At the very end, we will be drawing for a Film Fest, 2 tickets to the Film Fest, and a gift basket from our great partners. And then lastly, before we get Emily and Rachel up here, please enjoy this quick video about what Friends of the Big Sioux River is working on.
The river is something that we all share and we all use, even though you might not realize it. You know, a lot of our drinking water in this area comes from the river. A lot of our recreational activity comes from this river. And a lot of the economic development is happening along the banks of the Big Sioux River.
Sioux Falls has this incredible and beautiful resource, the Big Sioux, that deserves to be at its best and is a really special part of the community that we live in. And it takes nonprofits like Friends of the Big Sioux and volunteers to really help maintain it so that it can be a point of interest for people that come visit our city and for citizens of Sioux Falls to be able to enjoy it.
As a community, it's important to understand and care about our natural resources because that's all we have. If that river runs dry or it's so polluted that we can't use it anymore, we have no water to use. So it's important for us to use the river in an appropriate way and understand how we impact it.
I think you can learn a lot about a city based off of the condition that its rivers are in. And I don't think that our river currently matches what this city is and what this city promises.
Big Sioux River is highly contaminated now with different pollutants and We want to get it back to a space where folks can recreate and actually use the river like we once did back when we first settled those areas.
Water quality is the breadth of which everything is made. So we have to think about water quality not only sustains our future economic and environmental growth, but also make sure that we're able to grow in a more economic and controlled manner. So water quality is really going to set the stage for what Sioux Falls and what Eastern South Dakota looks like in the future.
Some of the projects and initiatives we're working on is really, again, educating the community on what's wrong with the river. Because the river doesn't have to be polluted. It wasn't that way when we found it, and it doesn't have to be that in the future. Water testing is a big goal of ours, so we work with the state of South Dakota to actually water test and collect water samples to help provide data to see what's wrong with the river and how we can fix it. We also want to be an educational resource, really bringing awareness to the community, what's happened to the river and what we can do together to fix it. So we've been working with local breweries to use Big Sioux River surface water, clean it, and brew with that cleaned water. And what we're trying to do is showcase how water impacts everyday life and what it takes to clean the water to get it to a point where we can consume it.
I've had this dream since we opened up about wanting to brew a beer with the Big Sioux River water. Because one of the things that we're concerned about as a brewery is access to clean, potable water in the future. And I think everybody, because of technology and how easy it is for us to just turn on a tap and typically have clean water, we just think that that happens. People are kind of removed from what actually goes into cleaning that up. So for us, just kind of that combination where we both had the same goal about raising awareness about keeping water and access to water clean, it was a no-brainer.
Really, the goal of Big Sioux Brew was to shock and awe everyone. If you imagine getting a beer and say, hey, we made this beer out of Big Sioux River water, the first instinct is for you to go, ew, no. We want that reaction. We want everybody to say, oh my gosh, and then react. That means that we're going to be talking about the river. We're going to talk about water quality. So that's really the main goal of Big Sioux Brew, which has really been successful.
Getting involved with Friends of the Big Sioux River, there's multiple opportunities available. We do cleanup events throughout the summer months. So we're out there picking up trash along the banks of the Big Sioux River. And a lot of the community loves this way of giving back to the river because you get down into the muck and pulling out trash and you can physically see what you're taking out. In addition to that, we do water testing throughout the year, so volunteers wanting to help out. But at the end of the day, a lot of our actions are grassroots. Really start bringing that conversation to the elected officials, to decision makers, to business owners to really move that momentum forward that this is an important process, this is an important resource in our community that it's worth protecting.
All right, well, thank you everyone for coming out tonight. So to begin our evening together, we're going to be talking a little bit about our 2023 water testing data. So to begin with, we want to just give an overview of our river. The Big Sioux River is about 419 miles long. It starts up near Summit, South Dakota, and empties out into the Missouri down near Sioux City, Iowa. It drains roughly 9,000 square miles, mostly in South Dakota, but also in parts of Minnesota and Iowa. And this is an area about the size of New Jersey, to give you an idea of what this landmass is. And we really want to highlight that the scope of a river is going to extend beyond its boundaries. So just because you don't live right along the banks doesn't mean that you don't have an impact on the river. Everyone who lives in the watershed is going to have an impact on our water quality. So all these communities that you see highlighted here on the map are part of our watershed district and have an impact on the water quality here.
All right, so moving on to water testing, Travis alluded to this a little bit, and one of our major goals for this organization is to make sure that we're using fact-based information so that we understand what the problem is so that we can get a better solution on how to fix the problem and work with partners and the community on how to move that direction. So One of the things that we do here at Friends of the Big Sioux is we do a lot of water testing along that watershed. What are we testing for? Well, we're testing for 3 primary components, which is E. coli, total suspended solids, and nitrates. And we're going to talk a little bit about those a little bit later in the program, but those are the 3 things that we're testing. We collect nearly over 500 samples throughout the watershed during the spring and summer months, and we're collecting those. Now, it's important that we're spanning over 100 miles from Del Rapids all the way down to Akron, going out there by the Galvin, all those great places. In fact, if anybody's interested in running that route, it's a really fun summer program to do, to go collect those water samples. And I say this every year, but I was out at Lake Galvin, I found a 12-pack of Busch Light unopened. So that was going to the same 12-pack of Busch Light. So just, and I'm not promising it happens every time, but at least once, I'm sure it will. So moving in there, we do a lot of water testing, and it's really important. We do follow the South Dakota Volunteer Water Quality Monitoring Program, and we do that because we want all of our data to get incorporated with the rest of the data that the state of South Dakota is pulling together. And the reason that's important is the more data that we have, the more that we can make good, educated decisions as to whether or not we're improving or if there's something going awry related to the water and the river specifically. So why do we do this? We sample local lakes, rivers, and streams to help determine the water quality of the Big Sioux River. Again, we need to make sure that we're educated and we understand what the components are. And results are included and rolled up with the rest of the data that the Department of Ag and Natural Resources of South Dakota are collecting. So now we've just added to that data. And one of the reasons that this is so important is because if we just assume that the state's going to collect all these samples, the data that's going to come in is going to be slower, and we're not going to be able to make these decisions. So us all working together, collecting this data, adding to the rest of the data, we can make better decisions and better impact as to the water quality. All right, so now you guys have all been here. I know that you're here to hear the 2023 water results. Drum roll, please, Emily. No. We'll do that. But like we said, we mentioned we do a lot of testing, and we want to make sure that we understand why we're doing it. So why it matters? Remember, we've got recent water crises across the U.S. that have elevated awareness regarding the importance of waters and rivers. We're no different in South Dakota. We want to make sure that we understand the importance of water, and we want to protect that beautiful river that we have. The more that we can protect it now, it's easier to fix when it's not as broken, right? Same thing they tell us about your car, right? Change the oil versus wait until the engine blows up and you gotta replace the engine. So that's what we're trying to do here. We really want to make sure. So in the results that we had for this year was that in 2022 we had over 17 inches of rain, and in 2023 we only had about 9 inches of rain. Why is that important? Because all that rainwater washes across the watershed and ultimately ends up in the river. So it is going to impact the water quality. So we want to take that into context as we're looking at that. As a result of that, the data from 2023 looks pretty good. It looks like we've made some improvements, but we do know that we have a lot less rainfall coming in, and there's a trade-off. We'd much rather have the rain, right? We need the rain to come in. But we want to make sure, and that's why we're looking at this data over a wide period of time and over a long across the watershed. In addition to that, we did see an improvement in water quality overall on 2023 compared to 2022, and then looking at that 5-year trend. Our rivers and streams are regularly exceeding safe levels for E. coli. Now, what does that mean? So, and we're going to talk about this later, so I'm not going to get too crazy, but we want to make sure that the E. coli levels, which is an indication of the total amount of bacteria that we have in the stream, is at those safe levels. And we're looking at safe levels for immersion, recreation, etc. And so we want to make sure that those are happening. The levels in the river are exceeding. Now, where is that coming from? That's coming from runoff from whether it's fields, agriculture, urban, all these different places in which we can carry animals, wading and drinking in the water, all contribute to that E. coli number. And so as you can imagine, as we see rainfall happens and all of that washes up, dog waste is a huge contributor, geese from parks. We all have a contribution to E. coli in the water. So all those things are going to directly impact specifically when there's more rain. Water quality decreases in the Big Sioux River as it flows south. That is a definite statement. So as we look at the water quality of the river starting up, we're starting our testing up as high as Dells, but then even going as far north as Brookings, and then even a little bit further than that, the water quality does decrease as we get closer to the Iowa border. So we know that we're making a negative impact. So that helps us to isolate some of the areas specifically that we need to focus on that are having a direct impact on water quality. And then finally, nitrate levels continue to gradually rise in the Big Sioux River. Now I will currently state that the nitrate levels are still within the safe level. And this is the success of a program like this and all of you guys getting together. We're still in the safe level for nitrates, but they are continuing to increase the levels we're seeing those come up. And the reason that we care about those, nitrate, we talked a little bit about how the Big Sioux River contributes to not only infiltration into the aquifers from which we're getting a lot of our drinking water, but it also is a direct source of drinking water. And nitrates is not something that we want to drink. We don't want to have to treat for nitrates to remove that before our drinking water. High nitrate levels can lead to blue baby syndrome and things like that. So it's a huge health risk that our drinking water folks are watching very carefully. So the best thing to do is not put it in the source water so that we don't have to worry about removing it. So we're really keeping an eye on that. Now, where is it coming from? Fertilizer application should be limited based on accurate soil testing. Pet owners, pick up and properly dispose of pet waste. So remember that when we think about nitrates, nitrates are coming from lots of different sources. And every one of us in this room can make a positive contribution to nitrates, to suspended solids, and to E. coli in the Big Sioux River. And that may be as simple as making sure that we're picking up our pet waste, as we're going through, properly applying fertilizer on our grounds and things like that. All of these things, there isn't a single person in this room that can't positively impact the Big Sioux River and water quality. If we all work together, I think we can make an impact. All right, so now we get back to data going through. Now, one thing that I will point out is you'll notice the far column over on the left-hand side is the number of samples. This is one sample set in which we look at. When we make big decisions on how we do things, we look at large variability of data. And I'll ask the Harrisburg High School because what's the confidence interval on this data? Anyways, you didn't know you were doing math today, did you? Oh, okay, I'll catch you later. But we want to make sure, so you can see here we've taken samples at key areas on not only the Big Sioux River along that watershed from Dallas down to Akron, but then also on key contributing factors. So it's, things like Split Rock Creek and Stone Creek, which are streams that are going to contribute to the Big Sioux River, and their water quality have a direct impact on the final water quality of the Big Sioux. So we're looking at all those things, and you can see the color's a little bit hard to see, but you can see that on average, you can see that we've got some good numbers in there, right? Things are going good. And then you've got some really high numbers where we're exceeding those. Highly dependent on when you take the sample, but we can't be judging on that. We want our river to be clean 100% of the time. So we want to make sure that we understand that. A lot of the times when you see these higher numbers, it will be after a rain event or something to that effect where we're washing some of the stuff. That's just as important as the data that we collect when there's no rain events or anything. But you'll see that the three specific areas that we're looking at, the nitrate levels over on the far right, we're still seeing them. They're well below the safe level of 10 milligrams per liter or 10 ppm, but we're continuing to see those numbers creep up. We'd love to see those numbers detected, and we wouldn't have to see them at all. And then the E. coli and suspended solid numbers, where we see nice indications in some cases, but then we see the spikes. Our goal with Friends of the Big Sioux and all of you guys is that we don't see any of those spikes, and those become an anomaly. We don't look at them at all. So again, the overall consensus on this is that we have a significantly less amount of rain, which makes the data look a lot better. And first of all, I like to celebrate, so we say, hey, that's great. Let's take a little bit of a win here, right, and say that's great, but our work isn't done. We want to continue working on watching those nitrates, so making sure that we're picking up our pet waste, we're watching things like that, we're thinking about those things, And then we're focusing on suspended solids and E. coli. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later.
So now we're on to our 6-year overview of water quality. So as Rachel mentioned, rainfall is going to have a direct impact on water quality. So Friends of the Big Sioux has been testing for 6 years now, and there are 6 sites that have remained the same throughout our 6 years of testing. So those are all highlighted here on the graphs. The red dotted line that you see is the total rainfall from April through September. And we've got graphs up there for E. coli, TSS, nitrates. And you can see a pretty strong correlation between when we have more rainfall, we've got worse water quality. And then when we're in periods of drought, like this year, our water quality gets better. So we really have a toss-up between, do we want better water quality but be in a drought, or do we want to actually have water in our river and maybe have decreased water quality, at least at this point in time.
I think Troy and Jim might have something to say about that a little later.
So you can just see, like I said, a very direct correlation there between our 6 years of data, and you can obviously look back even further, and we'll show that in just a little bit too with the state's integrated report.
Awesome. So let's do a little bit of education. There's a small test afterwards. I hope you guys all write your number 2 pencils. It's just maybe 75, 80 questions or something like that. But we're going to talk about impairment status. So a lot of times we talked a little bit about it in the video where we said, hey, why don't we, and one of my favorite things is to go talk to people about the Big Sioux, and you always get that immediately, ew. I mean, like, ew. It's a gross river, there's something wrong, it's toxic, you hear that a lot. Well, let's make sure that we're educated on what we're doing here. And so the integrated report for surface water quality, this is a very thorough report that's produced every 2 years by the South Dakota Department of Ag and Natural Resources, and it's a statewide water quality assessment of all the lakes and streams in South Dakota. And at that point, they're looking at designated beneficial use standards. So the EPA requires all states to specify goals and expectations for how each water body is being used. That makes sense, right? If we're going to swim in the water, it should have a specific water quality that it needs to hit. If we're using that water to feed animals, or if we're using that water to irrigate fields, those are different water quality standards that we have to hit. So for example, if it's a domestic water supply, which the Big Sioux River is a domestic water supply in some pieces of it, immersion recreation, limited contact recreation, fish life propagation, any of those things in which it's what we want to use the river for, there are certain water quality standards that we want to hit for that. So we've set the standard for what the impairment is, for first of all, what we want to use the stream or river for, and that sets the water quality standards, and then from there, if we don't hit those water quality standards, then that stream or river becomes impaired. And that's really where we're at with the Big Sioux River. The body is considered impaired, which means it's non-supporting, it does not meet the beneficial use standard. And at that point, the state puts out a total maximum daily load for the amount of pollution or additional loading that particular river or stream can handle, so that we maintain that beneficial and hopefully develop a process in which that impaired water should specify targets to finally meet that impaired, or to meet those beneficial use standards. So next page. So before we jump onto this last one, we are impaired for the Big Sioux River for suspended solids. We are not meeting the beneficial use for suspended solids, as well as E. coli in some places. So again, when you're looking at immersion recreation, there's an E. coli level that you need to hit, and we're not meeting those in certain expectations, as you saw from the data. So those are the 2 things that are good. There's no toxic waste in the Big Sioux River. It's suspended solids, which is topsoil and suspended solids like dirt and things like that that are running off into the river, as well as E. coli, which comes directly from I lost my train of thought, but animal waste, human waste, any of those things that would contribute to E. coli levels in the river.
All right, so this is the data from the state integrated report from 2004 up to 2022 when the last report came out. We'll get a new report again in 2024. So as you can see, backing up, the Big Sioux River is split into 16 different segments. And so the state analyzes these 16 segments. Each segment has its own list of beneficial uses, which can make it kind of tricky because, for example, on the right-hand side, immersion recreation, only 9 of the 16 segments are for immersion recreation, whereas all 16 are for limited contact. So that can make it a little bit tricky to look at, but to simplify it for you all, with TSS on the left-hand side, pretty high in 2004, it really dipped down in terms of impairment, and now we're back up, but we're kind of leveling off. Same goes for E. coli, that was not added to the report until 2010, and that spiked and is coming down. The 2024 report will be really important to see if those numbers are continuing to stabilize and go down, or if this is just a fluke. We're really hoping they continue to come down. But as you can see on the right-hand side, the limited contact recreation has a higher amount of E. coli that it can withstand, a little bit over 1,000 CFUs per 100 milliliters, whereas immersion recreation is just over 200. So because we see that limited contact is going down, we know that E. coli is getting better within the river, and we hope to see eventually that immersion recreation start to come down as well. So overall, things are looking better. And like I said, that 2024 report will be really important to see how we're doing as a whole.
Yeah, so it's really important that we keep our eye on the prize. We don't want to get too crazy and say, remember, we had less rainfall this year. We want to continue to work towards preventing and minimizing suspended solids and E. coli, and then continue to watch those nitrate levels in the river, because we're not ready until this river is crystal clear with the rock bottom and all sorts of things like that. I don't know what else. All right, so key takeaways as we go through here. Water quality is directly impacted by rainfall. We got that right? That's on the test, I'll just let you know that. Because rainfall washes sediment into the river from rural and urban areas, and hopefully you guys have thought about 1 or 2 things that you can do at your house, at your business, at your farm, driving around in your car, anything that you can do to prevent sediment. Remember, when we do the stormwater drains and all drains lead to the river, that is a 100% true statement. So if we've got sediment on the road, if you're washing something off, all that sediment will eventually end up in the river. And while the current trend is incredibly hopeful, it is mostly related to reduced rainfall, and we must be diligent on our goals and our protection. There are actions we all can take to improve water quality, from picking up pet waste to reducing fertilizer usage or installing buffer strips. I will tell you, I encourage you, I challenge each one of you to do at least 1 river cleanup with us this year, if you haven't already, because it will give you an insight as to what we're dealing with on the river and how you can directly impact. We do a lot of river cleanups, and I know for me personally, since I started doing that, I don't look at a stormwater drain the same. I don't look at garbage on the ground the same. I don't look at anything the same. Everything I think about is, hey, did you just decide that you're going to get a straw wrapper from McDonald's and throw it on the ground? You're directly impacting my river. So all those things. So I challenge each one of you guys, help participate in a river cleanup this year. It's a great way to help out and learn a little bit more about the river.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Rachel. That is all for our water quality portion. And it is now my honor to introduce our 2 esteemed guests for the evening. Jay Gilbertson is going to be giving his part of the presentation first, and then Troy will follow up right behind. So Jay is the manager of the East Dakota Water Development District, a position he has had since 1994. He oversees a broad range of district-sponsored activities focused on water resources, including surface water and groundwater assessment, monitoring and protection, environmental education activities, and water policy development. He serves as the chairman of the State Non-Point Source Task Force, as a director on the South Dakota Association of Rural Water Systems, and as the district's legislative lobbyist. In a prior life, he was a geologist for the State Geological Survey, holding graduate and undergraduate degrees in geology, and specializing in the glacial history of the state. In his off hours, Jay hangs out with his grandkids and plays disc golf. Please join me in welcoming Jay Gilbertson to the stage.
Left, right, laser.
Yes.
Here we go. Cool. As they said, I'm Jay Gilbertson. I talk loud, so I'm not going to try and hang on to the mic while we go through here. Hopefully, there we go. As I said, we're going to talk a little bit tonight about current water resources in South Dakota, kind of the state of the art. No, that's a really poor choice of words. But anyway, kind of where we're at today and looking ahead into the future, which is what we really need to start focusing on, looking forward. My part of the show is sort of setting a little bit of the background about what's going on and what can be done. And then Mr. Larson is going to talk about some of the big picture plans that are in the works to hopefully take care of all of us down the line. What have we got? Run through that. Where is it? How are we using it? Talk a little bit about some of the growing demand and then things that we can do to address future needs. And the last of those is the setup for Mr. Larson to talk about it. What is probably going to be the answer, no matter what the question is, as far as water goes. Okay, first off, surface water. Where is it? In South Dakota. You know, depending on the time of year, it's wet or dry, pretty much all over the place. But for the most part, we are not going into 10,000 lakes. I want to say the list, the DNR list is about 500 and some. And having grown up in the land of 10,000 lakes, I would question probably 540 of those designations. But hey, we're in South Dakota. Your lake is your lake, and I learned that. In general, our surface waters, which are going to be the lakes, you know, we've got a cluster up in the north, you know, the northeastern part of the state, the upper end of the Prairie Toe, this old glacial pothole lakes out here. We've got a few rivers that run through the system, like the Big Sioux and the James and the Vermilion, out west of Cheyenne and some of the Moreaus. They are rivers in South Dakota. They would be creeks in almost any eastern state outside of the Missouri. It's the biggie. If you get out into the hills, again, there are some mountain streams that feed a few reservoirs that hold a decent amount of water. But if you're looking for water to feed Rapid or Sioux Falls or Brookings or Watertown, those really aren't going to do it. Okay, we need bigger quantities. And the one big quantity that we have is that little yellow line running down the middle of the Missouri River. That is our surface water resource for the future. And we've already got a number of systems. You know, if you're here, you're in good shape. Yankee's not too bad. We're already starting to pull a fair amount of it. There are a number of rural water systems, Lewis and Clark, technically not a surface water intake, but close enough. Mid-Dakota, Minnie-Wachoni, West Vermont, Jones, Webb. Some of these are moving water from the Missouri, case of Webb, all the way as far east as basically Wabash, almost to I-29, because there's really not much. And they're in the middle of this area. Out in the hills, again, surface water can help, but it's limited. Two pictures in case you haven't seen the lake in South Dakota before. Lake Kampesca up here at Watertown was until probably 20 years ago one of the city's primary water sources. They have a plant on the northeast side of the lake. Pactola, this is the old Watertown treatment plant, of course, the Missouri River down there. For Sioux Falls, as has been mentioned a couple of times, the river is it's part of the three-legged stool that provides water for the city. Prior to the advent of Lewis and Clark, about 11 years ago, it was part of the two-legged stool that works out. It was the river or the shallow aquifers in the area along the river and along Skunk Creek. Okay? Now we draw from all three. But the river is the least used resource. It's currently providing the least amount of water to the system, but it's providing water and it's necessary and it's important because the others aren't going to get any bigger anytime soon. Groundwater in South Dakota, the geologist to me, there's 28 slides. No, there are a lot of slides. I'm going to go through real quick. Basically, east of the river, it's glacial, sand and gravels that hold the water. They're hard to find, and we spend a lot of time looking for them. If you go west of the river, out in the Black Hills area, everywhere in between, the aquifers are basically big flat layers of rock that, if you kind of know where you are relative to them, it's very easy to figure out how far down you have to drill. Now, what you're going to get isn't always the greatest stuff, but it works out pretty well. In the glaciated areas, the stuff is scattered all over the place, and we have to spend a lot of time looking for it and trying to kind of suss out where it might be. I've got an image later on. I just kind of gave this little speech here. Here's the West River stuff. Most everything is layers. So if you know your elevation, you know the elevation of the target, you can drill a hole X number of feet deep, and 99 times out of 100 you're going to hit it. Around the hills, a lot of that water's not bad. You get away from the hills, and it's been in the ground a very long time. It's picked up a lot of stuff, and it's yuck. That's a geology term. So much so, and of course this is a dated picture because the flaming fountain in Pier was flaming at this time. That is the infamous flaming fountain there in Pier. That's a well in the Dakota Formation. In addition to having water pouring out of the ground, it's under artesian head conditions. It was full of natural gas and actually heated the capital for a number of years. It appears that we finally depleted the gas supply, and actually this well is in the process of being decommissioned because it's an absolute nightmare from a safety standpoint. The water in the ground is wet. That's about all you can say for it. Okay? And if you have nothing else, there are Dakota artesian wells all the way, pushing almost to the I-29 corridor. Because if there wasn't anything else, everybody knew if you drill down deep enough, you get the artesian and up it'll come and you make do. As I said, eastern side of the state, our side of the Missouri River, all the oranges and different colors, those are the glacial sediments. We like to draw a lot of different maps and use different colors, so it's real busy that way. Most of the water sits in we call glacial outwash, sands and gravel deposits left behind when the glaciers retreated during their numerous visits to South Dakota over the various years. You can put a lot of water in the spaces between the little pebbles and sand grains, and that's what we've got. As I mentioned earlier, though they don't follow any kind of a pattern unless you've been looking for them a very long time, and then I'm only slightly better than anybody in the room at predicting where they're going to be. And so what we end up doing is having to go out and drill holes, lots and lots and lots of holes. It's easy to see the stuff on the surface because it's on the surface. We've got up to 1,000 feet of glacial sediment in some places in the state. We have no idea what's down there until we drill holes. And these are some of the holes being drilled. And there's a map of the whole list from just 4 years ago. There's a lot of teeny little green dots. And hopefully, what you may pick out for some is that a lot of them, particularly eastern side of the river, well, really everywhere, are in a regular grid, right? North, south, east, west lines. That was intentional. These were holes drilled to find out what is down there. Systematically going around, punching a hole, let's see here, punch another hole on a grid. We weren't looking for anything in particular, we wanted to find whatever was down there. And so we've actually got a tremendous database of what's going on. Of course, when I get a request for information about a particular spot, the nearest hole is 2 miles that way and 3 miles over there. That's just the way it works. We could always do more. What that has led to, for certainly much of eastern South Dakota, where we can just take an initial shot, are maps that provide information on where aquifers might be. This is the map called the First Occurrence Map for Minnehaha County. Any of the colored shaded areas, the oranges and the yellows, are superficial sands and gravels. Yellow's alluvium, the outwash is more of the orange. You can follow the Big Sioux River down around, loops through Sioux Falls, drops out to Brandon, and heads farther south. The gray colored units are buried aquifer materials. They're not exposed to the magnetic surface, but they've been identified through all that systematic drilling and poking around. And the areas in white are ones where there's basically nothing in the first 100 feet. And in Minnehaha County, there aren't many places where if you go over 100 feet, you aren't going to hit quartzite. And the quartzite is kind of a mixed bag as far as aquifers go. But this is at least an effort to look at what's going on and see what's out there. There we go. Oh, all right, Anyway, that's kind of what we know is out there, or where it is. Now, how are we using it? Well, this is sort of the old slide. Friend Jason Farrick here used to be a state senator from up north. Kind of all small potato stuff. This is the used to be sort of thing. You know, small farms like Jason's, little towns, individual houses, maybe some heavy duty irrigation in a few places, but it was all pretty limited usage. Smiling little agronomist up there, Dr. Clay from SDSU. We used a lot, there were a lot of people using a fair amount of water, but not in huge quantities. To feed that need in South Dakota, because even though we weren't using a ton, there was more demand than there was availability. What developed, particularly in South Dakota, are what we call our rural water systems. Think of your city water distribution system. They've got a single source and run pipes all to every house. These were folks that would set up and identify a well field somewhere and run pipes to all the farms in the county or a multi-county area. So instead of having 20 feet or 100 feet between homes, you might have a mile, but there you go. Take the water from where it is, ship it off to where people want it. And as you can tell by sort of looking at the blank space, there aren't a lot of places where rural water hasn't reached in eastern South Dakota, which is to say, and a few of those, particularly along the Big Sioux River Basin, the areas right over the aquifer itself, you don't need somebody else to bring you water, you're sitting on it, but for the rest of eastern South Dakota, and a good deal of the west, if there's better water elsewhere, please bring it to us. These systems have built out, and then down here in the lower corner, the hatchet area is the rough service area for the Lewis Park pipeline, which I'm not going to talk about because that's story stuff. Now, what's coming or what's here already? We have gone from little farms and little towns and single houses to big, giant farms and big business and tremendous demand. You know, this is we call the Veblen dairies up north, well, near the town of Veblen. Those are the aficionados of northeast Marshall County. 10,000 cows under one roof. They use a lot of water. Okay? And the dairy business, if your herd isn't at least 7,000 or 8,000 these days, you aren't doing anything. There are no small new dairies being proposed. They're 5, 6, 8, 10, 12,000 heads. Economies of scale, and they need a lot of water. Ethanol plants or similar ag processing facilities. Well, let's obviously put this together. Holstone is still a potential thing here in Sioux Falls, but you know, and big developments. Sioux Falls doesn't add 20 people a year. They have 5,000. Okay, that's a new legislative district every 4 years. That's a lot of demand. The likes of which, again, we don't have little beaches, we have water parks. Demand at a level that we have not ever seen before, and frankly aren't really prepared to deal with at this point in time. This is my old Sioux Falls slide. It doesn't, it's not bad for what it does. I point out the gray line here, again, here's total usage in yellow up top. The gray line down here at the bottom, which isn't doing anything until 2011, that's the Lewis and Clark contribution. Two-legged stool, three-legged stool. As soon as Lewis and Clark comes online, the city takes probably as much as humanly possible. And the river, which is the red line, drops to zero consumption. Because it was easier to buy treated water from Lewis and Clark, less costly, than it was to treat the water out of the river. The takeaway there is by 2020, the river was back online. What does that mean? Students in the back room. Why is the river back in play? Come on. Find educational institutions. Oh, maybe tell Stephanie you didn't know what's going on. What it means is the groundwater in Lewis and Clark weren't enough. Okay? When Lewis and Clark came online, you can shut the river off. But if you got to turn the river back on, that means demand is now exceeding the ability of the other two legs to serve. And the river's probably going to stay online because the demand continues to grow. So we need to address that. So, future sources. Standard response for a lot of folks is, well, just build a bigger pipe. Okay, there is no bigger pipe. Open the tap wider. No, that's not how it works. Okay? The water has to come from somewhere, and if it's not where you are, it's going to have to be moved. Water resources are finite. There's only so much at any given spot. They're geographically limited. Again, that's why we have regional water systems. Not everybody can get all the water they need of good quality at one spot. So we have to move it around. A pipe can only transmit so much water. 54 inches, Mr. Larson, is the size of the Lewis and Clark pipeline. You cannot push an unlimited amount of water through that pipe. 16 million gallons a day is about the upper limit, I think, for that system. Ish.
For us right now?
Yeah.
Well, 36 million gallons.
Well, I mean, that's what you can do now, but if without a bigger pipe, 60-ish is about the limit. So if you need 100 million, you can't just crank up the pressure. It doesn't work that way. And developing new resources takes time and money, so we need to start planning. First up, what do? We need to protect what we have. Up and down the Big Sioux River Basin, local county governments, Minnehaha, Lincoln, Union, Moody, Lake, Brookings, a whole bunch, have all adopted what are fall under various names as groundwater protection ordinances. Our surface water, the aquifers that we use, are at land surface for the most part. So if something happens at land surface that was bad for the water, it's in the water. And that's really critical because that's where our water is coming from. And so in recognition of this, there are land use limits in place from Summit all the way down to Cook Lake that limit what can be done over the shallow aquifer. And these have been in place since the early 90s. For the most part, 1989, Brookings County did it first. This is huge, not something you can find in many places around the country. And it makes a big difference. In most counties, this is a little chunk of Dual County to the north. The shallow aquifer is any of the stuff that's colored in yellow. There's an awful lot of not yellow, not colored area in Dual County. If you need to do something that's not necessarily safe, there are lots of places that you can do that that aren't over the aquifer. You know, want to build a new chemical processing plant, pick a spot in the white somewhere and you're fine. You're not going to hurt anybody, at least as far as shallow aquifers are concerned. Okay? But if you want to build it over the yellow, and particularly if you want to build it over the green, you're going to be in for a fight. And at this point, after pushing 25 or 30 years of implementation, we've only had one instance where the local county government folded a little bit to development pressure. Every other time in every other county, if someone came in and said, we want to build this bad thing over this thing that you've determined to be a risk to the aquifer, the county has said, no, you cannot do it. The one time they didn't do it, that lasted about 24 hours until the lawsuit was filed and they folded like a sheep cat. It was pretty clear that that green hatched area there on surrounded by the circle, it's the if you do not have your own well in Dual County, that is where your water comes from. That is the sole source of publicly supplied water in the whole of Dual County. There is no place in Dual County you want to spend more time with that. Flip is, you can pretty much let everything else go to hell. So, protection. We need to do a better job of finding the resource. Even with 35,000 little green dots on that map, we need to know more. And we need to get out. And we need to refine some of the lines on these maps to a greater degree. This goes for quantity as well as water quantity. Get a better handle on that. Hydrograph on the top is the, where's that? Oh, it's the gauge of Watertown. The little yellow line is the long-term average. The blue line was whatever the numbers were in 2015. Sometimes we have a lot, sometimes we have very little. We need to kind of get those average numbers. The more we know, the better. How much water is going on. What we want to ultimately avoid is perhaps what's going on down in the southwest right now, is where the water supply is doesn't have any water in it. You know, Lake Mead. The more we know, the better. Water quality. Rachel and Emily mentioned, efforts, ongoing efforts to monitor water quality, both surface water and groundwater, are underway and conducted by the state, by Friends of the Big Sioux, by my organization, to get a better handle on what's out there, what the problems might be, and what can we do to protect it. Oh, I did not come through at all. Well, we'll skip that one. There's a huge network of surface water monitoring sites. There's a network of about 150 monitoring wells that look at groundwater resources across the state. For some reason, this image didn't translate very well in the PDF version, so we'll have to fix that and show it to you later. But anyway, there's a lot of information going on there as well. Directed development is another option that probably needs to be pursued. Unfortunately, everybody wants to come live in Sioux Falls, so they want to have their business in Sioux Falls, and they want to have a zillion gallons of water. And nobody wants to be told to move to Chamberlain for some reason, for the water. Obviously, the spot I'm standing on here, where should we go? Death Valley. Yeah, up there. Not if you're a water-intensive business, this is a really bad place to be. Okay. Now everybody laughs, but you'd be surprised how many times somebody's come in and, yeah, we drilled a well and didn't find anything. Oh, well, okay. You got to move so many miles away, and there probably might be a well there. How about we move 200 feet? They'd already built the building, which was going to hold a giant fish tank, which was going to grow tilapia, the little fish. What do you need to grow fish? Water. Did they have water? No. Building in Death Valley. Let's avoid that if we can. Again, you've got a bit of an aquifer map. If you're going to build up in Grant County, the darker colors tend to be less water. Let's build there. If we want to stay away from the water, go to the lighter, warmer colors if you need water. Don't just pick the spot that works best for some other reason. North Dakota has done a little bit of work in this regard. The colors on the map are basically, if it's green or blue, there's plenty of water available. If it's yellow, yeah, it's kind of limited. And red is like, yeah, no, don't bother. There's nothing there left over. We can put some maps like this together for South Dakota. New addition, we can reuse our water. Purple type. It doesn't necessarily have to be cleaned right back to Perrier level distilled water cleanliness for certain activities. And this is actually something that Mark Potter, the Public Works Director, mentioned to me the other day. Talk with the new Mapleton Golf Club, this private golf course up just north of northeast side of town. They're up here just north of the interstate. That yellow dot is what? Anybody tell me? Outside of it. Remember? No. That's the city's wastewater treatment plant. Okay? They could just about, hit a good driver, not me, maybe some of the Munsons or something could do that, but they clean up the water. They could send some of that mostly clean water across the interstate and water the grass rather than pump treated water as a cover. Doesn't work for everything, but it's a way to lessen the demand on new water. If you can recycle, thought I had a, no. Yeah, I'm no good at this. Yeah, but that red arrow would work. Okay, lastly, those are all options that are out there and available, but in reality, where are we headed? We're headed toward this. Things like this is a picture of the Lewis and Clark pipeline. It's not a Terry Redmond print, although I think it sure looked like one at the time. It's big regional long distance transport. If you can't bring Mohammed to the mountain, you have to bring the mountain to Mohammed. In South Dakota, this is kind of where our surface water is laid out. We have lots of rivers all over the place. They're all tiny. And this is not even the scale. If it were, you really wouldn't see any of the other lines on the map compared to the Missouri. So if we need water, the only place to go look in huge quantities is the Missouri. That's where the water sits. And it's a long ways from where we are. There are a lot of folks already using it, but we're using a relatively modest amount. And these are just the reserves that are in place. You've got Lewis and Clark semi-up to date. About 350,000 acre feet is what's really out there in terms of reservations. By comparison, last winter, early January, down in Yankton, 14 million acre feet of water was running by the area. Everything that we have in reserve, and we have huge reserves, barely single-digit % of what's out there. There's plenty of water in the Missouri that we can tap into. We just have to figure out how to move it. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Larson, who's going to talk about ways to move. Both we're going to have questions later. And he's going to do this for
Thank you so much, Jay. That was very informative, and I'm sure we'll have lots of questions afterwards. I am now excited to introduce Troy Larson. Troy is the Executive Director of the Lewis and Clark Regional Water System and has served in that role for almost 21 years. Prior to joining Lewis and Clark, Troy served as a congressional aide in Sioux Falls, 7 years for Senator Larry Pressler, and then 6 years as State Director for then Congressman John Thune. He has a bachelor's degree in business administration from Mankato State University and a master's degree in administrative studies from USD. Troy grew up on a farm near Groton, South Dakota. He and his wife lived near Hartford for 33 years before moving to Round Lake near Madison this past September. They have one daughter who is a freshman studying physical therapy at USD. Please join me in welcoming Troy Larson to the stage.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the invitation. I'm going to keep my eye on the clock because we want to leave some time for questions. Actually, it's the clock right there, so I don't even need this phone. All right, let's dig right in. Going the right way. All right, here we go. So Lewis and Clark Regional Water System, some of you may not even have heard of this, so I want to provide a little bit of background about what Lewis and Clark is. Lewis and Clark is a regional water system that includes 20 cities and rural water systems. 20 cities and rural water systems all said, hey, we all are going to have future water needs. Let's join together. Instead of each of us doing our own thing, let's band together to solve our common water problems. And so in South Dakota, there are 11 members, Minnesota 4, Iowa 5. Some of our members like T, Harrisburg, Parker, Lennox, Beersford, they are Centerville, they are sole source members. That means the only source of water they have is Lewis and Clark. Other members like Sioux Falls, it's a supplemental source of water. So roughly 50% of Sioux Falls' water comes from Lewis and Clark. A little bit of background, we're a nonprofit wholesale provider of water. We do not hook up homes and businesses. We provide the water to our members, they in turn provide it to their customers. The idea started in the late 80s, and I like to say it was back when I was wearing parachute pants, if any of you know what even parachute pants are. But the whole idea started about 87 to 88. It was incorporated in 1990, finally authorized by Congress in 2000. It's owned and governed by the 20 members, 15 of whom are cities and 5 are rural water systems. When we're completed, it's an area about 3,500 people, or excuse me, 350,000 people will benefit, and we cover an area the size of Connecticut. So we like to joke that Connecticut is a unit of measurement for us. Groundwater is drawn from a series of wells that tap it into an aquifer along the banks of the Missouri near Vermilion. Something unique is the Bureau of Reclamation is the funding agency for Lewis and Clark. They only operate in the 17 most western states. They don't go into Minnesota and Iowa. So this is a very unique opportunity for the states of Minnesota and Iowa to benefit from a Bureau of Reclamation project. Bureau of Reclamation provides oversight with regard to construction, but they don't have anything to do with operation and maintenance. We are totally self-sufficient in terms of water rates covering our O&M. Construction funding is 80% federal, 10% from the 3 states, and 10% from the 20 members. This is an important point to make, that the members had to make their request for water back in '93. And they had to look ahead and they said, for the next 40 years until 2033, what do you think you're gonna need? And that's what Lewis and Clark was designed for. That's important because 2033 is gonna be here before you know it. So Lewis and Clark was never intended to be a 100-year solution for members. In terms of operations, our treatment plant is 2 miles north of Vermilion. We began serving water to our first 11 members in July 2012. We are currently serving 17 of our 20 members. 2022, we delivered 7.7 billion gallons, and that's an average of 21.1 million gallons. We're going to crush that in 2023 because we've added more members. Sioux Falls is also using Lewis and Clark to a higher degree. In terms of construction, I want to define some terms. I'm going to use the term base system a fair amount, and that is what was authorized by Congress. That's 44 million gallons in rounding numbers. We are currently working on an expansion of the system up to 60 million gallons a day, and as Jay indicated, that's the maximum that our pipes can handle. And then we're also looking at a possible second expansion. What do we need beyond the 60 million gallons a day? Do we need parallel pipelines? How can we address the needs for the next 40, 50 years? Sioux Falls, just to put it in comparison or context, Sioux Falls last year averaged 23.5 million gallons a day. St. Paul averaged 40 million gallons a day. I just put that in context because if I say 60 million gallons a day, that really doesn't mean anything to you. And so I'm trying to help you understand what 60 million gallons a day means compared to, for example, Sioux Falls and the city of St. Paul. Construction, the state of South Dakota recently approved additional groundwater rights for us. We have to get groundwater rights from the state of South Dakota. It's the Missouri Elk Point Aquifer. We recently requested another water right for an additional 17 million gallons. That needs to go to the legislature this session because it exceeds 10,000 acre feet. 17 million gallons equals about 19,000 acre feet. So anything over 10,000 needs legislative approval. Coincidentally, the last time the legislature had to act on a request like this was from Lewis and Clark in 1994. So here we are 30 years later coming back, and I'm so glad Senator Jim Bolin is here. I had a chance to visit with him before the program started about this. It'll be a concurrent resolution, so it's not even going to be a bill, it's going to be a resolution in the legislature that they have to give their stamp of approval before we can get this water. And Jim's been a huge supporter of Lewis and Clark through the years, and he's going to be, this will be his final session, so I want to give him a shout out before he retires. Jim, thanks for your service. The base system construction started in 2004. We're 95% complete. Sheldon, Iowa is going to be completed, connected by the end of this month. Madison in the summer of 2024. Sibley in the summer of 2025, and then we need to complete an expansion of our treatment plant. So about 2026 is when we expect that the base system will be completed. Last year, we started expanding our system. So we're not even done with the base system, we're already expanding it. Some members aren't even getting any water, we're already expanding. And that primarily is because of the drought. A few years ago, I would have said the expansion is 15, 20 years off, but the members saw the handwriting on the wall that not only the drought, but growth, demand far exceeding what we can provide. And so we started last year on the expansion. It won't be done until 2031. And it's not like if you get half of it done, you can get half the capacity. It has to all be done. So in 2031, we'll see a bump in the members' reserve capacity. This is the footprint of Lewis and Clark. Everything in blue is currently operational. Green is where we're constructing, so we are getting toward the end of the project in terms of pipeline. So that's good news. And again, this is about area the size of Connecticut to put it in perspective. In terms of construction, right now we have a record 18 construction contracts open, the most we've ever had. We only have 2 contracts left to complete the base system. That's the expansion of the treatment plant and then a couple backup generators. So we only have 2 left, we're getting close. Each member will receive a proportional share of that expansion. I mentioned the expansion to 60 million gallons a day. All 20 members voluntarily said that yes, we want to participate and pay for our share. There is no federal funding for the expansion. I talked about the federal funding to help construct the base system, but there's no federal funding for the expansion. I just want to go through some pictures here. Lime sludge is a byproduct of the treatment process. So lime is used in the treatment of water, not the kind you put in a margarita, by the way. And so we currently have 3 lime drying beds, and then we're adding 3 more. Lime, once it's dried, has many agricultural uses. So it's put on fields, etc. Here's a picture of our treatment plant near Vermilion. Here is some of our 54-inch pipeline that went from the Missouri River up to our plant, about 9 miles of what we call raw water pipeline. So this is the untreated water being brought to our plant. Then beyond the plant, it's again 54-inch diameter pipe going up to the T pump station and reservoirs. This is the T pump. This is just northwest of T. This is the pump station and a couple of our reservoirs. Each of those reservoirs are 7.5 million gallons. We have a 3 million gallon water tower on the southern side of Sioux Falls. There's a story behind why that logo is so small. I'm not going to tell you the whole story, just to say you can't fight City Hall. City Hall considered that a freestanding sign, so it's like Arby's or something. So there you go. We also have some smaller diameter pipeline, like 24-inch pipeline. Here's some of our 16-inch diameter pipeline. Some of this you're seeing here is the line to Madison. Some of this is also in Iowa. The lower right-hand picture is from Iowa. In terms of funding, we need about $37 million to complete the base system. I finished this presentation a few weeks ago when I said I fully expect we're going to get that in FY24. I was a little optimistic. We're going to be about 11 million short, so we're going to have to go back to get a little more funding in FY25. So I mentioned that the expansion is totally at the cost of the members. Thankfully, the states are helping a little bit. We are getting some ARPA funds. South Dakota, Iowa, state of Minnesota has approved some dollars to help bring down the cost of the expansion, because ultimately it's the ratepayers paying for this expansion. Everyone that buys water, you're the ones paying for this. And so we're thankful that the states came through with some money. Even so, the members still need to cover about $100 million toward that expansion to get to 60 million gallons a day. So it's a big cost. So again, that gets us to 60 million gallons. What do we do beyond 60? Back in May of 2019, which was a record wet year, 2018 was record wet, only to be broken by 2019, even wetter. We started discussion about expanding Lewis and Clark, possibly doubling in size. The reason I point that out is this is not being driven by the drought. We were talking in a record wet year, looking at the growth demand, that we need to do something beyond 60 million gallons a day. And so we're looking at what we can do. And I'm looking at the time, so I'm gonna kind of go through these a little quicker than I normally would. But we need to start now deciding what we're gonna do. We are looking at an appraisal level study of the feasibility of expanding the system beyond 60 million gallons a day. We would have to go back to Congress, get authorization. This would be no new members. We're not going to add more cities or water systems. This is simply providing more water to our existing members. Dakota main stem is a possible alternative to a second expansion. So Lewis and Clark is an option, either double what we have or go with Dakota main stem. And I'm going to use the remainder of my time to talk about that. So Dakota main stem, I want to start in the northeast part of the state. There's a project up there called Water Investment in Northern South Dakota, called WINS for short. That's the City of Aberdeen, Webb, and BDM Rural Water. They all said, hey, we need more water. Let's band together and run a pipeline from the Missouri River to our area. So there's already some pipeline. They just said, we need more. So those three started this project called WINS, and they're working on that. Then there's a project starting in the western part of the state called Western Dakota regional water system, and they're trying to bring Missouri River water to basically all of western South Dakota. They haven't quite identified their service area yet. So that has been in the works for a couple years. So what we had then was a gap in the central and southern part of eastern South Dakota. So a group of us, Jay and I were part of that small group, said, hey, we need to do something. We all need more water in the future. Let's see if we can get this project off the ground called Dakota Main Stem. And currently, their first board meeting was October 2nd, so this is just getting off the ground. There are 29 cities and rural water systems that are a part of this. I've highlighted 5 of them, or I should say bolded them, because those 5 members are also members of Lewis and Clark. So this isn't competition of Lewis and Clark. This is, hey, maybe instead of us expanding a second time, maybe we can join forces and potentially more of our members. So we have 15 members that aren't currently on the board. Potentially they could join this as well. So Dakota Main Stem is in the works. What we're trying to do, and I talked to Ryan with Ducks Unlimited, he's from the Bismarck area. I don't know if we have any other North Dakota friends here, but what we're trying to do is emulate North Dakota, and I really hate to admit that. North Dakota is about 15 years ahead of us when it comes to water development. We hate when North Dakota is ahead of us in anything, let alone 15 years, but at least we're ahead of them in football for a short period of time. But North Dakota realized long ago, we need to tap into the Missouri River. We need to take a more regionalized approach. So North Dakota is in the process of constructing 4 major regional water systems. When those are done, 85% of the entire state's population will be served by one of those 4. That's what we're trying to do, is emulate what North Dakota is doing with this regionalization approach. And we're making progress, but we have a lot of catching up to do. So what I'm going to do, just for the sake of time, is I'm not going to cover too much about Pick Sloan. I was going to share a little bit about this. Pick Sloan, I'm going to give you the 2-minute version. The creation of the main stem dams back in the 40s was the Pick Sloan project. And the reason we call this Dakota Main Stem is the main stem dams, a promise of giving up all this land, was in return we were going to get all this water. And it was mainly in the form of irrigation. And for various reasons that did not pan out. And so right now, South Dakota is only getting about 5.5% of the water promised to it through Pick Sloan. There is a lot of untapped water. Lewis and Clark is a child of Pick Sloan. So when irrigation didn't happen, what the state did is pivoted to rural water systems. That's why you had Lewis and Clark and other projects. So we are a child of Pick Sloan, but the point is we have a lot more water that we can be tapping into, and we need to, and the answer is more regional water systems. That's the very quick version of Pick Sloan. Questions for Jay? You want to come up here? You got 5 minutes for questions. This slide, this gentleman did this analysis of Pick Sloan of what was promised to each state and what each state actually got. So what I skipped over was his analysis. And what it showed is Pick Sloan, Montana, North Dakota, and South Dakota are the biggest losers in terms of what was promised and what we got. So again, we need to make sure we're tapping in to what was promised to us. That's a good question. So if I understand the question correctly, so our 20 cities and rural water systems are going to have to decide either do the Dakota Main Stem or a second expansion of Lewis and Clark. And 3 main factors that we're going to consider. One is cost, and that's a big unknown. It might be cheaper for us to go with the other cities and rural water systems like Brookings, Huron, etc., and partner with them. So cost is a big unknown. The other thing we have to consider is which one will take the least amount of time. They're both going to take a lot of time. Presumably, we could expand Lewis and Clark quicker than starting from scratch. So that's probably a check in Lewis and Clark's box in terms of the second expansion. And which one will be the least difficult? They're both going to be difficult. Which one's the least difficult? And presumably, amending Lewis and Clark's existing authorization
will be less difficult than starting from scratch. So there's two boxes that lead me to believe, if I had to bet right now, a second expansion of Lewis and Clark would probably be the way to go, but the big unknown is cost. And so that's why what we are doing at Lewis and Clark is supporting both efforts. We're supporting wholeheartedly Dakota Main Stem, and then we're also making sure we're going on a parallel path so that in a year from now, the members can choose for themselves which one makes the most sense, and they may choose opposite. Madison may choose something different than Sioux Falls. To the degree we can, I think it's good that we all stick together. There's power in numbers. So to the degree that all 20 pick one or the other, I think is best versus 10 go one way, 10 the other. But what it would mean for a second expansion is, whether it's Lewis and Clark or Dakota Main Stem, we need a bunch of parallel pipeline. So we would essentially be replicating everything. It's just a source of water. Dakota Main Stem is looking at Chamberlain, for example, and maybe they bring the water to Madison and somehow we tap into it there, or do we bring it up from Sioux City and we tap into it where we're at now? But that's a good question, so we're analyzing that, yes. Well, and inflation, the numbers that are off the chart, but back in the day, the cost for the pipeline, 54-inch pipeline, generally speaking, when we put that in, I would say a rough number was $2 million a mile. That's probably $5 million a mile now. It'd be tremendously expensive. So Lewis and Clark, I didn't share this, but the overall project, what I call the base system, is going to be about $680 million. If we had to do that today, it would be double that, I'm sure. And so what we're looking at with even Dakota Main Stem, that's probably a $2 trillion project. Billion, sorry, not $2 billion. He said, you and I didn't know. I say, you and I could pay for that. I don't know.
You're supposed to use your pinky here when you say billion.
Yeah.
Talked a lot about increasing or meeting demand. And we talked about, Jay mentioned using recycling or reusing water. Is there other plans for decreasing demand? I see Sioux Falls, and I don't see any water restrictions in Sioux Falls or anything like that.
A slide I skipped over for the sake of time is conservation. That is something we all preach. We absolutely need to focus on conservation, educate. We need to reduce our use of water. Sprinklers, all the water going on grass. I think that's going to be something we're going to look, in 20 years, we're going to look back and say, we were doing that. So we have to conserve, absolutely, but we cannot conserve our way out of this. That will buy us time, but it will not solve the problem. You're absolutely right, we have to reduce demand.
Yeah, some of the questions that are being asked in some of the regional systems, and find it won't happen there, but anyway, the Minnehaha Community Water System, which is the rural water system for Minnehaha County, right? And Big Sioux, which is up in Lake Louis, are going together and jointly developing a new well field and treatment plant that will, when completed, provide between 8 and 9 million gallons per day. Okay, and they're well on their way, the funding lined up that we're committed. Before they turned shovel one of dirt, they were approached for all of the water. The entire capacity had already been asked for. Now they haven't committed any of that because they've got other people and so forth. But I mean, it's not small towns and small farms coming in and saying we'd like to hook up. It's huge operations that represent, in many cases, tremendous economic development opportunities that are sometimes very difficult for the leadership in a small or even large community to say no to. But there you go. 1 million gallons a day is roughly the equivalent water demand for 4,300 homes. So if they need 1 million gallons, that's great. We'll send it to Hartford and they can build a plant, but everyone's going to live in Humboldt or, Crooks or Fulton because there will be no water left in Hartford.
There's a few more questions, but I'm calling a good senator.
What will it take to get the Big Sioux into a reasonable condition? How long will it take? What steps need to be taken to move back in that direction?
From a water quality standpoint?
Yeah.
It took us 130 years to screw it up. We've only been working hard at cleaning it up for 20 or 30. We've got a ways to go. A friend of mine was asked a very similar question one time, what would it take to return the Minnesota River to the way it used to be? And the part of the semi-flip answer was, all the people would have to leave. You know, I mean, the trade-off with living in a big city is you generate a lot of stuff. And it's going to be nigh on impossible to have zero emissions from the city of Sioux Falls and go back. I mean, we are going to have an impact on the river. From a water quantity standpoint, though, you know, there just isn't enough water in the river, no matter what the quality, in terms of use. You can treat anything if you have the need. Our problem from a water use standpoint is there's simply all of the water in the river is essentially spoken for. And so we need to find unclaimed water somewhere to add.
Ma'am, you had your hand up.
Well, I was piggyback on that question. Have either of you been in talks with city leadership in Sioux Falls to impose more stringent restrictions on lawn watering?
Yeah, I believe that our members have been very aggressive with that, even though they have access to more water. For example, Harrisburg. Harrisburg has access to a lot more water than they're tapping into. They wouldn't need to put water restrictions but they are. They want to train their citizens that, you know, odd, even, or whatever the restrictions are. Now, I think your point being is even though there are all these efforts underway, 5-10 years from now, are they going to need to get more aggressive?
Should we be doing that now?
Right.
And following up with fines?
And you're seeing, you know, football fields now cost more, but they're putting in artificial turf. You know, T has that versus grass. You just can't plan on watering like you used to. Yes, sir.
So how does South Dakota protect its interest in Missouri River water from competing interests in other areas?
It's a good question. I skipped over that as well. Is that we absolutely know other states are looking to the Missouri River, both getting to North Dakota and South Dakota. Colorado, Utah, we know that is happening right now. Our focus is to get there first. Now, we're going to leave, your question is how do we keep them out, I think. That's not our role. We're going to leave that up to the feds and the states to argue about. Our point is, if someone wants to come in and get more water, someone's going to have to decide that, but we want ours first, and that's what North Dakota is doing. That's why North Dakota has been so aggressive. They're not trying to keep anyone out, they're just trying to get there first, and we want to get there first. So, I don't know if you have anything to add in terms of...
You know, although the East is just to the east of us here, South Dakota, like all other Western states, we operate under Western water law. First in time, first in right. And there are a number of, you know, existing permits, claims on Missouri River water, some of which are active licenses, others are future use permits. I'm of the opinion, that there's plenty of water in the river right now. One of the things that North Dakota is doing, and we need to start thinking about that, is just making formal claims against the water for future use would be a way of, you know, not forestalling Denver from coming looking, but in language that they would understand too. Hey, this much is already spoken for. If there's some left, you're welcome to fight for it. We'll do what we can. We need to start looking big picture and holding on to some of this stuff. Back in the 90s or 70s, the NC pipeline and some other things were the last time there was a big fear about water moving into the basin. The state legislature made some changes. And you could hold water rights and future use permits and things. And based on reasons I cannot, to this date, fathom, we were able to acquire a future use permit for 400,000 acre feet of Missouri River water. When we discovered this future use permit, which I didn't know anything about, the total consumption of the Big Sioux River Basin, including what at the time was viewed as, I think, maximum Lewis and Clark operating at 27 or 30 million was only about 70 million gallons a day, or 7,000 feet of water a year. And we had 4, 5, 6, 8 times that much water reserve. The idea, I think, was very clearly to lay claim to it, to hold off containers. I think we need to go back. We gave up a lot of that. That the state's recommendation made sense at the time. In retrospect, we maybe need to go back and revisit that situation and at least lay down a claim to as much of the Missouri River as we can